Well, happy Africa Day, everybody. And Africa Day is, of course, a remembrance of May the 25th, 1963, when 32 African countries signed the Charter of the Organization of African Unity, or the OAU, which has since evolved to what is today known as the African Union, or the AU. Now, today is intended to celebrate and acknowledge the continent in the fight against colonialism after many countries got their independence in the early 60s. However, according to Professor Everisto Benyera, the fact that we struggle to commemorate this day demonstrates how Africa is fading into a footnote and will eventually disappear from our memory. Now, Associate Professor of African Politics in the Department of Political Sciences at Unisa, Professor Everisto Benyera, joins us now virtually for a conversation about this. Professor Benyera, happy Africa Day. Good morning.
Happy Africa Day to you, Sakina. Happy Africa Day to all. I hope that this was a happy day for us, but sadly it is a day of sadness as we reflect what we have missed and how far we are regressing from the original goal of the Organization of African Unity to decolonize, and to the eventual goal of the African Union to ensure peace and stability and regional integration in Africa. We are regressing to as far as asking our children to pronounce an elbow in their native language in deep salute. This is how far we have gone back, Sakina.
So what is at the heart of this regression? Why are we struggling to actually live up to the ideals that were set out during that charter signing?
There is a notion that is referred to as coloniality. It refers to the continued existence of colonialism and apartheid long after their official end. In other words, there is this colonial matrix of power which continues to haunt Africa. I am not by any stretch of imagination exonerating African leaders and Africans from abdicating on their own agency. African leaders lack In fact, Africa lacks good leadership. We have got everything in Africa. We don't have an energy crisis. The sun is there, the wind is there, the coal is there. We have a leadership crisis. The Inca Dam in the DRC has got the capacity to generate electricity for the whole of Africa with a remainder to export to Europe. So what we are lacking in Africa, on top of the effects of coloniality, is just and ethical leadership. Leaders who put themselves last and not first in the queue.
So why are we then struggling as the electorate across various nation states to actually choose people who will be ethical leaders?
That is a very complicated question, because if we look, there's a convention that was held. I think it was Business Unit South Africa hosting the President of the Republic, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the President was narrating a story about the 22 million rand flag. I was astonished by the laughter that was generated by the business leaders. I failed to see the joke in the almost misappropriation of 22 million rand. And if business leaders can laugh at that and fail to see the red flags and hold the executive to account, what about the ordinary person in the street? But to a more nuanced response to that, our institutions are geared towards not serving the people, but serving the elites. And there are three types of institutions that we are talking about here. There are imposed institutions, that institutions which we inherited from colonialism and apartheid. Then there are improvised institutions, and finally there is what we can call inherited institutions. These are the ones that we deliberately took on board. So these institutions are being used to structure society. For example, you must hold elections, you must be on the party list, you must belong to a political party or to a political faction, and then we see contestations over gender, citizenship, and belonging rearing their ugly heads as the majority of the citizens are left out of the structures of the economy. Sakina, we have got more people that prefer to go on service delivery protest than to go and vote, because the institution of elections has produced leaders that do not resonate with the wishes of the people. The elections have given us leaders who do not experience what we experience. They don't go to Chris and Baragwanath when they are sick. They do not send their children to our schools. So the leaders that we have in Africa are European leaders by their standard of living and by what they do every day. They are merely with us geographically, but in terms of their lived experiences, they are not with us, Sakina. And they cannot account to us because they are not with us.
One could, though, argue, Professor, that this happens with the tacit approval of African people by and large. Because, as you say, these systems of democracy that govern our various nation states are ones where the electorate, the general public, the people on the ground are the ones who go out and vote. And by doing so, are we not accepting and legitimizing what is otherwise seen as failed leadership?
I wouldn't want to blame the electorate very much or to victimize the victims, because what happens when elites come together is a system that is known as elite collusion. So these are elites from the army, from the church, from the banks, from wherever. They come together and then they sort of protect each other. So much so that when they put out an institution such as elections, be it at a branch, at a cell, or whatever, what comes out there is already predetermined by the overarching background, which in this case is normally a capitalist background that is meant either to produce long incumbents or to sustain the status quo. Let me quickly, Sakina, before I forget, just touch on the issue of what Africa has done in order to live up to the expectations of the founding fathers, Kwame Nkrumah and the rest of them. They wanted Africans to live in dignity, to have human security, and to make Africa a united country. The question that, in fact, a set of questions accompany the failures or the drifting away that we are experiencing to a point where we struggle to commemorate Africa Day. Firstly, why is it that the black person continues to be at the bottom of the ontological ladder? Whether you go to Ukraine, whether you go to the United States, the way that blacks are treated is exactly the same. What accounts for that? Secondly, why does Africa's present read like the past of Europe? The disintegration that we are having, the wars that we are experiencing, the lack of social cohesion, even at community level. Because if we do not have cohesion at a community level, we cannot expect it at national level, at regional level, and at continental level. It starts with social cohesion in Diepsloot, then it grows to Johannesburg, to South Africa, to the SADC region, and to Africa. Why is it that we are actually regressing to a point of saying you are a Tsonga from Malamlele and I'm a Tsonga from Guyana, or I am a Tsonga from Tsanin? Then there is the issue of the African problem. So what exactly is the African problem? Is the African problem an African problem? In my analysis, the people that we referred to are the ones that lack what is known as epistemic independence. Pardon my word. Epistemic independence is the ability to think from where you are, to think on your own terms without the incumbency of patriarchy, history, colonialism, to be who you are. I think as Africans, that is what we lack. We think from Europe, we think for Europe, and everything that we do is based on Euro-North American standards and basis. For me, the cardinal issue is the absence of epistemic independence.
So let's speak to that. Let's bring it to the South African context. So in South Africa, and as is the case across the rest of the African continent, you have what would be termed African leaders and leadership in place. But if we talk about South Africa, you are, as Africans, as black South Africans, a numerical majority but a cultural minority. And how do we come to a point where we change that, where we actually are and exhibit who we are supposed to be, or who we are supposed to show the world we are as a country, and not the European standards, as you put it, that we exhibit?
The middle class, Sakina, is a sellout class, because instead of using their resources and their intellect to prop up what we can call the lower class, they use it to aspire to become the elites themselves. So you do not see anybody willing to fight the system, but to join the system. And by the way, the system that I am talking about is a colonial and apartheid system, which is not stagnant, but one which is always migrating and reinventing itself. Initially, the system was very economic and was very political. You can call it the economic and political empire. So the French were all over West Africa, and the British were in Southern Africa, the Portuguese were in Angola, they were in Mozambique, and so on. That was the economic empire. It was fought through colonialism. And what the empire did was to reinvent itself to become a financial empire. This is where you saw globalization, the markets ruling, multinational corporations, big companies coming to the fore to represent the political empire like the British Commonwealth. And again, there was yet another movement from the financial empire to what has been variously termed as the epistemic or the cognitive empire. Now, the empire is at a place where it is no longer worried that much about your land, but about what you think and how you think, and most importantly, about what you don't think about. Yet Africa is still stuck on the first type of empire. Africa is yet to consolidate itself to respond enough to the economic and political empire. Yet we have moved so far, we are now at the cognitive level. Education, what we teach at universities, is modeled around Euro-North American standards. A university, such as the University of Venda, has got nothing in common with Venda except the name. Yet the ideal of a university is such that it is supposed to be at the University of Venda, where all the local problems arising in Venda are addressed. So the university is supposed to be a problem-solving center. Then we have gotten a paradox, very high number of graduates and very high numbers of unemployed youths. How do these two exist next to each other? It is because our economy is misaligned. Our economy remained stagnant in the first empire, yet things have moved to the third empire. These are some of the challenges that we are facing, Sakina, that of a misaligned economy to the realities of what is required there, and it manifests itself variously: unemployment, underemployment, pseudo-employment, and even inequality and poverty, because the graduates that we are producing do not have the required skills. Their skills, I do not want to use the word redundant, but their skills are misaligned from what is required today. And this contributes to the continued marginalization of the black race at home. As a result, as you rightly said, the black race is a numerical advantage. But when it comes to power dynamics, we are a huge minority. How is it that the numerical majority are the power minority? It is because we lack epistemic independence. We do not want to beneficiate our own minerals. We do not want to hold our leadership to account. In fact, what we do is to turn on each other and say, It is these people that are taking our jobs. It is these people that are robbing us. Instead of saying there is a failure in policing, there is a failure in putting in place and monitoring policies, rules, and regulations, then we blame each other. As long as we continue to degenerate in that way, there is very little for Africa to celebrate today, Sakina.
So as we have to wrap this up, let's talk about the African Union today and how effective it is in still promoting the ideals of that first charter. How are we progressing on that front?
The African Union is one huge disappointment, especially after its reinvention from the Organization of African Union. But maybe let me start with the positive, Sakina. We now have the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and also the African Continental Free Trade Area. It is the biggest free trade area in the world, but the positives end there. If we ask the African Union today, where is the African standby army to protect Africa? Where is the centralized currency that is based on our gold, not on somebody's gold, but the gold that is mined here in Africa? African Union, where are we with the issue of a common citizenship? So the effectiveness of the African Union is one that has been characterized using the very fact that the headquarters of the African Union is a donation from the People's Republic of China. So the African Union is the one that is at the head of failing the African people because it cannot hold itself to account. And it trickles down. It has got a multiplier effect. If you cannot hold yourself to account, then you cannot hold the regions to account. Then the regions cannot hold the countries to account, and the countries cannot hold their executives to account. So it then becomes a cascadation, if I may use that word, of executive impunity, where there is no accountability to the people on the ground whose quality of life continues to deteriorate, never mind the fact that we have all the resources. The population is here, the minerals are here. What we are lacking, Sakina, is just ethical leadership, so that the real ideals of Africa Day cannot be misappropriated and misrepresented by the cutting of a ribbon here and the giving of a speech there. After that, we are back to the status quo ante.
We're out of time, Prof. Final question. You said that the apparatus, the systems are stacked against the citizenry, as it were. So how do you change this as a continent?
It's very complicated, but already there are ideas. There is the need for the nation to decouple itself from the state. The state is the instrument that runs the nation, the country, the people. And the people and the nation have got this marriage of convenience that was formed during the anti-colonial and anti-apartheid movement. I believe that it is time for the state to decouple for the nation to decouple itself from the state. That way, we begin to address effectively issues of citizenship and belonging. We move away from the naturalization of a problematic and bifurcated subjectivity of the notion of a people for a place and a place for a people. I am from there, therefore you cannot come and join me there. We move away from issues of gender-based toxic masculinities, where women are the numerical majority, but when it comes to power dynamics, they are the minority. Finally, Sakina, at an ideological basis, we need as Africans to admit that we need a new ideological framework. The ideologies of rainbowism, Chimurenga, Harambe, African socialism, ethnic federalism in Ethiopia, the secession, there are new states that were formed, Eritrea from Ethiopia, South Sudan from Sudan, they have all failed. We see that Africa is struggling to find an effective mechanism for managing power succession. Is it going to be the liberation movement? It has failed in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique, Namibia. Is it going to be the family? You see that in Togo, the Ayademas have ruled for a long time. In DRC, father to son Kabilas. In Kenya, the Kenyattas. In Botswana, the Hamas. In Gabon, we've got Oma Bongo, the Mutarikas in Malawi. So, Sakina, what is that vehicle that we need to use to manage succession politics in Africa? Is it the monarchy? Look at what is happening in Eswatini and in Morocco. We need to invest our intellect in addressing this issue, but we need to have epistemic independence first.
Well, Professor Benyera, thanks so much, and quite a bit to mull over there. Thank you so much to Professor Benyera talking to us there about Africa Day and, of course, what we are celebrating or what still needs to be done. With that, it's over to Leanne for your latest news.